All right. So super excited to have Ty with me today. Ty is the founder and CEO of Cantilever, a solid design firm in you're based in New York, right?
I'm in New Jersey, but our team
Okay.
is global. We have people in five different countries and maybe six different time zones, something like that. So we are a fully global organization, but sort of centered around New York. The majority of our clients, at least in some point, touch on relationships that we have had in New York, but we now have relationships all over the world and serve clients wherever they happen to be.
That is awesome. I'm trying to remember, how did we even meet? I think I reached out to you about a year ago.
I
After,
forget. Yeah. So it was one of those random LinkedIn synchronicity events. And we got to talking and just really clicked. And it's been great to get to know you and hear about your entrepreneurial journey and now to be kind of a part of the work that you're doing to help other people along that path too.
so when I connected with you about a year ago, right? We got talking and I learned more about your entrepreneurial journey. And now after knowing you more, I feel like it's very unique in the sense that you've been able to grow Cantilever to the point where it is right now. And I just want to peel back the curtains, a little bit more and talk about what that journey has looked like for you and the why, right? Why the heck did you start Cantilever and stay in the game and bring it to the level where it's at right now?
Yeah. So when I started, my main motivation was just to do more projects, bigger projects. I was a freelancer doing graphic design, web development myself for different clients, but I knew that in order to do some of the work that I had ambition to do, I was going to need a team. And so the reason to have a company was essentially so that I could support that team and grow a community of people to work with. So once I started to cultivate that community around me, it made a lot of sense to formalize that and be able to bring in people full time and be able to kind of commit to working together and creating an ethic and a way of working together that would be really unique. So it was always kind of driven by like the work that we wanted to do rather than it being driven by a desire to have a company per se. So it's always been about kind of the end, not the means. And I think that's part of why we've been successful. We never really set out to make it a, this splashy thing that was going to get a lot of attention or VC money or anything like that. We didn't even borrow any money for 8 or 9 years into the business. So it was always just about trying to do the best work we possibly could and letting kind of growth trail that in a lot of ways. And we waited to grow substantially until it really felt like it was time.
So lean growth and
Lean and all,
sustained growth.
yeah, at times kind of foolishly so, like overly restricted in our ambition. So like there were a lot of things, a lot of moments where we might have been able to make a key hire or bring on a bigger client if we had been willing to borrow or willing to finance or take, sell some equity, things like that. But we always had this very conservative approach. And I think that it served us well in a lot of ways because we're here 10 years later. But it also, when I talk to people who are just starting their firms, a lot of the time I will encourage them to be a little bit more aggressive than we were, because you can definitely, we could have been meeting our mission better if we had grown faster, I think.
Wow, that's very interesting. I was going to ask you, when you mentioned about your conservative approach, I was going to ask what you do differently, but then you really leaned into that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. And, to be honest, a lot of it comes from fear. And a lot of it I consider almost like my MBA or my training, that those, first 6 or 7 years, where a lot of it was just starting, learning how to delegate, learning how to hire, learning how to trust people, learning how to be an organization that's doing something creative as opposed to just having one person do something creative. So, I guess in that regard, I don't see it as much of a mistake as more of just a different path, but we've always just been comfortable kind of taking our time to learn and to feel ready before we take those next steps. So, sometimes we've been a little bit slow to leave the nest, but I can't say I regret that aspect. It's definitely good to be careful. And I also, my entrepreneurial journey is a little bit unique because it corresponds exactly with the journey of my son was born the summer of 2011. I started the company in November of 2011.
Oh
We
my
really started
goodness.
in the winter of 2012. So basically his lifetime has been the arc of Cantilever. So always in the back of my mind as I've been going on my journey, I've been thinking about how this impacts my family and my ability to, put food on the table and all of that. And I haven't really been able to take some of the risks that I might have in a different era when I could subsist on ramen and live with my parents.
Fueled by ramen. That is awesome. And with your dad's book, Theology of Making, I bring that in because it's not only a very interesting book, but also like even the way you work at Cantilever, you have this craft, love for the craft of web design. What's the term you use? Is it a digital hospitality?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
So there's a big aspect of that that almost seems theological, like this
Mm.
work as holy. And I'm curious about the connection between those two. You grew up, right, a child of your parents, in that environment, and your dad is this great artist who's written this awesome book. But I'm just curious, like, how does that come to bear at Cantilever as you look at the work you do as something? And when I talk with you, when I interact with you guys, there's just this aspect of you take this darn seriously, and it's
That's
this
very true.
really
Yeah.
important thing. So I'm just curious about that. Like, has it always been that way, or is it
Mm.
something that has grown over time?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's a very insightful question. I haven't maybe plumbed the depths of the origin of that craft mentality that we have that much. But my parents are a therapist and an artist. They were both entrepreneurs in their own way. They're both self-employed, and so it never occurred to me that being self-employed would be stranger, harder, or more of a challenge than anything else. So it always felt very natural kind of path for me. And both of those sides of my upbringing have given me very important tools for what I do today. So on my father's side as a painter, when I was a child and a teenager, I used to work with him and help him make paintings, and I saw the craft develop and the process of it from the very sort of rote things of like getting materials, like making sure the right stuff gets shipped into the studio, all the way through to finishing something out, and the many hours and many layers of paint or material that my dad puts on his work that makes it very rich and deep and powerful. So I saw that process of putting time and effort and attention into making something creative, and that certainly carried over into how I thought about web design. And then on my mom's side as a therapist, she really taught us a lot about empathy and about care for other human beings and about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And when we say digital hospitality, a lot of that is delivering empathy through a digital medium. It's understanding what someone is there to accomplish, not thinking about yourself and your own needs as much, but really thinking about what they need and orienting the website around them. So a lot of the time it's delivering empathy through that technology or through that craft. And I think that's what makes our work unique, is that we have a unique amount of attention on the end user's experience, as opposed to just thinking, well, what do we want to say? What do we want to do? What do we want the website to have? It's really, actually, let's think about what they're here to get and work backwards from that.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for diving into that. I am curious, throughout your journey, or about 10 years now for Cantilever, like what are some, obviously we've talked about the financial aspect of, let go of don't be too conservative, right? Be open to risk, calculated risk to help you grow, taking, whether it's equity, giving away some equity or whatnot. But what are some other key things, if you have that handy, where you're like, oh, these were solid learnings, even 3 or whatever number you got that come to mind?
Well, I think we're a service business. So a service business is essentially a group of people. There's some other stuff that you put around it. There's a mission that draws people in and that you kind of try to fulfill, and you have certain values and the way that you approach your craft or your service. And you might have some methodology, but you don't necessarily have a product. You don't have a facility. In most cases, you don't have a supply chain. So as a service business, you're defined by your people. So I think the most important thing that I would advise people to do if they're starting a business like mine is to really, really think deeply about the kinds of people who you are looking to attract, and making sure that your brand, what you put out into the world, how you talk about your company, is attracting those right people. Because whenever I am speaking about Cantilever, I am trying to emphasize these things that we believe in, because it's almost like a beacon to anyone out there who believes in those things as well. And they can say, oh wow, I've always thought about it that way. I'm working in a place that doesn't feel that way, and I want to change. Or they can think, wow, I've never been in this field before, but that I'm really intrigued by that possibility. Maybe someone who's in hospitality or someone who's in another kind of technology. So
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing, is kind of having a very clear sense of what your group is about, what the values of your group are, and taking that very seriously, and not just writing a bunch of values like honesty, integrity, but really thinking deeply about the characteristics and the attributes of the people you're trying to attract, and hammering those things home every single time you get to talk about your company. And then you talk for a second, and I'll think of another
Oh,
lesson.
no worries.
That's the big one. If
I'm,
you're a service business, you're people. You're just a bunch of people. So you have to be very, very careful and deliberate about cultivating the group that you want to have.
Yeah, totally, totally. Thank you for diving into it. It's something I've been seeing definitely as well. We are a service company as well at Eikon Labs, and yeah, as we build rapport and build trust with our whoever the people we want to attract, it's very important to be crystal clear on how we add value to them, why I want to work with them, and even those who do the work. I'm finding out, right? You probably hire people around your distributed team, and you want to attract the right talent, and it has to be a solid mission beyond just we do what we say and we say what we do and things like that, right? Where people actually want to work there. And yeah, it's super exciting. One other thing that I've been finding out, right, is and this is quite nebulous, it's disappointment, right? How do you deal with disappointment? And I'm going to lean into that. For example, for me, right, sometimes you reach out to a client, or they reach out to you, potential client or customer. You spend a couple hours on a proposal. They seem like they're like, yes, want to work with you guys. You spend maybe 5 hours or whatever the heck it is you spend on that. And then they come to you and they're like, oh, sorry, we're not going to go forward with the project, or we're going with another firm or something. It's probably something a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to with. But I'm curious, like, how for you have you handled that over the years? Does it get easier, or do you have a coping mechanism, or just riff on that?
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of scar tissue that you build up for those kind of disappointments. It's interesting. When I was just starting out, we almost never lost a proposal. And I think it was actually a mistake. I think that was happening because we were overpromising and charging too little, because we were afraid of losing the business.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things where if you're not getting enough rejected proposals, you might have a bigger problem than if you're only ever getting accepted proposals. So I think part of it is looking at the rejected proposals as proof that you are successfully categorizing yourself in the market to a specific niche of people that's right for you. And
Oh.
another thing that I say to other people in service businesses is that you can't do everything. You can't be everything. You have to be something specific. It doesn't have to be like super specific. It can be, but you at least have to be able to go to a client and say, this is one thing that we do better than everyone else. We don't know anyone else who does this better than us. And when you're first starting out, I mean, that's pretty daunting, because what could there possibly be that you're better than everyone else at? But when you think about all of your qualities, your background, your experience, your history, there's some intersection of that where maybe you are the best in the world at some very specific subset of things, some specific subset of work. And if you can get very, very clear on that, and then start to grow that over time, that's a really powerful message. And when you get that rejected proposal, a lot of the part of the way that you can cope with that is to say, okay, well, that wasn't this thing. When it comes to this thing, you want to win everything. But in the other areas, I think sometimes we get caught up in meeting payroll and things like that, and start to maybe chase some projects that aren't the best fit. And those are the ones that are the most likely to say no anyway, because they know as well that we're not necessarily the best fit. So I think, yeah, part of it is building up scar tissue, but part of it is learning how to really hone in on what your value is so that you don't have to feel that pain that frequently.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely something I've been coming across more. Like, so at first when we started, right, especially when I went full time February, every proposal, pretty much we got no rejections. And I concur with, resonate what you're saying, like over deliver and reduce the price on the quota bid so we could get the bid. And as we hone our skills and try to create a niche in the market or go after a certain niche, I've been feeling that resistance more. And it's like, wow, this is crazy, like going experiencing that. But it's also been good, just seeing the growth and those who resonate with the mission or in that niche. Like we've been also getting more demand from that side. So totally resonate with that.
Yeah, I do want to mention also that I empathize, and that's at the beginning, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to turn away work. So when you're first starting out, it's actually really hard to apply kind of what we're talking about, because you do actually have to build that reputation so that you will have the juice to demand or push for higher prices and things like that. So I totally get that. I don't mean to diminish that aspect of it, and I think it's probably the correct move. At very early on in our career, we basically took whatever we could find and used everything as an opportunity to learn, and we were always very overt about that, but we were charging, not very much, and we were talented and we could figure it out. And we got a lot of opportunities because people trusted that we would figure it out, and we did. So, that's part of the process as well, is that I think for a certain period of time, you have to kind of think broadly, because you might not even know what that thing is yet that you're so great at delivering. So that's totally okay. And I think it's a part of the process. It's just, so over time, I think as you build that reputation, it's a habit you have to start letting go of. And that's something that we really struggled with, is hitting that point where we are comfortable telling a prospect, I don't think we're the best fit for you. Let me refer you to someone who we think is going to be a better fit for you. And that's a tough conversation to have, because any entrepreneur, you wake up in the middle of the night worrying about meeting payroll or having enough work, and oh, what if I had to let people go because I didn't do a good enough job with sales? So that's a very real fear. But the opposite is also bad, which is that you become an undefined sort of revenue chasing amalgam of anything you could possibly do, and you never develop a competency that you can charge above the market rate for. So you're always getting pushed down and down and down by the market. And when new technology comes in, like Squarespace and Webflow, and people have different options, then all of a sudden, your business is now under threat because you're not differentiated sufficiently. So, and that's going to happen in every single industry. Well, yeah, let's talk about Webflow. It's an interesting one, because people ask me about this a lot, because our main business is building custom websites. So we do, coded by hand, very high level of detail. But we have started to do more Webflow projects because we want to be able to offer something at a tier of cost than our normal projects. And Webflow has some constraints that are uncomfortable for us. Like, it's harder to make a site fully accessible, which is something that's really important to us. So we kind of wrestle with that. Like, is it okay for us to build on this platform if we know it's going to have some constraints? And my conclusion has been that, yes, I think it's okay, as long as we are pushing it to its limits in all of the areas in which it is more constrained. Because ultimately what it means is that we're able to serve different folks who otherwise would be going elsewhere and maybe not getting the same level of quality that they would from either of our wonderful firms. Yeah. So for me, because we have been differentiated around our digital hospitality ethic and around our methodology of how we build sites, when Squarespace and Webflow and Wix came along, that wasn't a threat, because they were serving a part of the market that we weren't already serving. And we get to define how we're going to fit those tools into our general offering. So it puts us in a position of strength in the market, as opposed to being fearful of getting undercut. And the same thing is true of, less expensive competitors. I'm not afraid of people knowing, you can get a website for $1,000, you can get a website for $2,000, but you get what you pay for. So you can feel free to try, but we're very, very confident that our, 50, 100, $200,000 solution is worth that amount of money. And we can demonstrate why. We can demonstrate why it's had that business impact for our customers. So when you come at things from a position of that differentiation, it helps you handle a lot of those other questions that come up or those stresses that come up, because it gives you like a North Star around what you should be doing, and the same goes for those values that we talked about. If you have a clear sense of what your team is into and what your team believes in, it's easy to sort of categorize it and look at your work and say, like, are we able to apply this value? Are we able to apply that value? So those kind of foundations just really set you up for future success, make your decisions a lot easier.
Dang, I love it. I love it. When you mentioned that, there's some keywords I've heard in this conversation, particularly one, fear, afraid. And it's something I want to lean into some more. When I did Seth Godin's Alt MBA program in 2019, fear was a big thing we talked about, right? This fear that tries to stop you from moving forward. It's built in, it's almost innate. It's somewhat, primeval. It's in there in our psyche, and it's there for a reason. It helps you. You see a lion, you run. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's your life. But in spite of that, right? In spite of the fear, we continue to ship, and that's what Alt MBA is all about, right? Cuts out the fluff, from a traditional MBA program, and you just focus on shipping. You work through ideas and you ship them out the door. Steve Jobs said, "Real artists ship." It doesn't matter if you have a billion ideas. If you don't ship any of them, if you don't get it done well, then it's an idea. So until you ship that art and it changes someone's posture, then it's just something in your head. So a few times you've said that, and I'm just curious for you as an entrepreneur, even starting Cantilever, continuing to grow it, hiring, maybe firing clients, differentiating yourself in the market. Like, how has fear played a part in that? Because I don't think anyone is without fear, right? Well, for you, is this something you'd say, you use the word, you have a scar tissue, you get calloused over time. So is that something you'd say, you feel the fear, but over time you're like, I feel it, but it doesn't affect me as much anymore because we got to move?
Yeah. So I'm a very naturally neurotic kind of person. Like I'm the kind of person who has a system for everything and a place for everything. And so I like to be in control of my circumstances and my life and the way that things are set up. And so owning a business has been like immersion therapy. Like, how if you're afraid of snakes or whatever, the best thing to do is hang out with a snake, and it will scare the shit out of you, but it is the only thing that can actually sort of break those neural pathways between danger, like stimulus and danger. So you have a certain neural pathway, but then the more counter evidence there is between the stimulus and the danger, the weaker that pathway will get. And that's how it has been for me in business. So I talked about how, like, really for the first 5 or 6 years of the company, we didn't grow very much. And a big part of that was that I was afraid. I was afraid of losing that control, not being able to set things up exactly the way that I wanted, or leaving things in other people's hands and trusting other people. And I'm anxious. I still to this day, I will be in bed at night thinking about problems and have trouble falling asleep because I'm thinking about them. So I'm fully in touch with all of my fear. But I think, like you said, as I have dove in to all these problems, I mean, once you have those kind of conversations, those tough conversations, they do start to get easier. And I'm glad that I've approached it this way, because I've forced myself to have a lot of conversations that I was terrified of, and that I never thought I could have, and to write emails I never thought I could write, and to shake hands and talk to people I never thought I would have any business talking to people to. So the entrepreneur journey has been like a crash course in throwing all of my fears at me and making me sink or swim. And I think at times I have sunk, but over time I've learned how to work with those things and how to move past them. And that's been a big part of the growth that I've had over these 10 years, taking those lessons as well and applying them to other parts of my life, and how I treat my family, and how I think about myself and my progress and my journey as a human being, outside of entrepreneurship. So I highly recommend it. If you're anxious and you would like to be made much more anxious, start a business, and then you get to experience anxiety all the time.
Yeah, and that leads to the next thing, to bring this segment to a close. Really awesome to have you, Ty. What is one thing you'd like to leave with those who maybe are on a precipice? They're like, I want to make this jump to entrepreneurship, or maybe even other areas of their lives, things that they're scared about, but they're like, I really want to do this, but I have the fear. Do you have a few words, for those folks from your own experience?
Yeah. Well, yeah, my own experience, and then also I've met a lot of entrepreneurs and been a part of a lot of groups with different people who have been successful in business and seen their journeys and seen how people have struggled and seen how people have succeeded. And it strikes me that I think the main category of people who succeed are people who enter that kind of lifestyle because of some internal deep motivation to make something better, to change something. That there has to be a problem out there that other people aren't solving that you can solve. And in my case, my business is kind of a generic type of business. Like there's lots and lots of web design agencies out there. But I have a firm belief that our industry is not good enough, that we don't treat people well enough. We don't treat our clients well enough, and we don't treat our people well enough. So you have stress, pain, difficulty on all sides. If you run a web company, you hear similar stories to how people talk about their contractor, who's working on their kitchen, where people lose faith and lose trust and have all this trouble working with people. And that's broken. Like, I think we need to fix that. So that's part of my motivation, is looking at this field and looking at these talented people over here and these people who need talent over here and saying, why can't we work together better? Why can't we figure out a better way to do that? So I think if you go into entrepreneurship because you want to work in your pajamas or because you want to make a bunch of money, that I don't think that's going to pull you enough through those hard times to motivate you to be successful. I think you're going to hit walls, and if your motivation isn't strong enough, you're not going to get through that wall. So I would just be very honest with yourself about why it is that you want to go into an entrepreneurial lifestyle, and whether you're going to be happy when you have no time and no money and everyone's upset with you, because that is going to happen. And if you're not intrinsically motivated by what you're trying to do, you're not going to be able to push through that negative feeling. So be prepared and know that if you go into the right thing, if you find that right thing for you, because I think there is a right thing for almost everyone, that the experience of being able to push through that challenge is its own immense reward in your life, and it's well worth doing. If you find the right thing to put your energy into, it's well worth doing.
Love it. Thank you so much, Ty.
Thank you. That was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, I have been really glad to get to know you, impressed with your work, impressed with your attitude and your mindset. So I look forward to working together more and hopefully helping to build a community with you of like-minded people who want to talk about this kind of stuff. And so love what you're doing, and keep it up. Keep the content coming. I'm a subscriber, and I look forward to more.
Thank you, brother. I'm excited to continue to make shit happen with you, like a real artist.
Let's do it.